Here we have the map of 15th century Europe, and with this slide we begin Northern European 15th century art. Northern European 15th century art. It is the late Gothic period, early Northern Renaissance period, just as we studied in Italy. Well, in this area, this Northern European area that you can see here on the map, there was a tug of war between the religion and the sort of not religious, otherwise known as the secular. So there was this tug of war between the religious and the secular, the non-religious. And this tug of war will eventually lead to the Christian Civil War, otherwise known as the Protestant Reformation. That occurs early in the 16th century. We'll get to that later. But things are just going to begin to stir up now. See, in the 15th century, the region of the Netherlands, of Germany, France, was the heart of culture and art. Its role was very similar to that of Florence in Italy during the early Italian Renaissance. Well, we're going to begin in the region of northeastern France, which was referred to as Burgundy, like the color burgundy. This is Broederlam's version of the Annunciation and the Visitation. They were wings of an altarpiece. The International Gothic was indeed international. This is the Northern European version of it. This is one of the wings of the altarpiece on the far right, blown up to give you a better view of all of the details that are included. Well, you already know that the International Gothic style in Italy was expressed by the use of lavish costumes, of gold, of patterned backgrounds. Well, it could also be expressed through the use of the rendering of details. The rendering of details and particulars. For example, look on the far right there. You'll see that all of the plant life, all of the foliage is very carefully rendered, as are the very subtle variations in the landscape. Remember this, that the artists of Northern Europe will never cease in the rendering of details and particulars. It's just their thing. They will never cease in the rendering of details and particulars. The international style is also expressed in the ample use of drapery and in the softly rounded forms. You know, if you compare it to the Lorenzetti paintings that we saw a while back, Broederlam's picture space strikes you as pretty naive, kind of childlike. The architecture kind of looks like a dollhouse. The landscape is out of proportion with the figures. But the softly rounded shapes and the use of shadows creates a sense of light, a sense of air that more than makes up for any shortcomings that you can find in scale or in perspective. Remember that one of the attributes of International Gothic that you're going to see in Northern European art is that fascination with realism and detail, and here it is again. In the work of the Limbourg brothers were known for painting on manuscripts. They painted upon manuscripts. It's very, very precious, very, very delicate work. Here we have translated the Very Rich Hours. That was a book of hours. It belonged to the Duke of Berry, who reigned over this area of France. What we have in a book of hours is a book full of illustrated calendar pages, as you can see here, but it is also full of liturgical passages that were intended to be read privately at certain hours of the day. That's why it's called a book of hours. Well, these are very, very small in scale, just about 8 by 5 inches, but they are full of the most elaborate decoration. This represents that same international style that found its beginnings in Italy's Simone Martini. It's this fascination with courtly life, with deep, brilliant colors, with exotic fabrics and crazy animals. Look at the page on the left, which is the page for the month of May. You see, many of the pages, 12 to be exact, represent a month. And then the Limburg brothers depicted upon that page a scene of primary importance to that month. For example, it was on May 1st when the young men and the young women went on this grand procession into the countryside to collect branches and bring them back to town for this great bonfire and great party that they would have later on. Now, as you can see, this is a very fancy schmancy aristocratic procession. You have the accompanying ladies of the court in these gorgeous dresses. Even the men are wearing these beautiful cloaks and blue and gold ornament. It's thought that the man in the center in blue with that big furry hat on his head is the Duke of Berry himself. In the background is one of the Duke's many, many castles, because one castle is never enough. On the right-hand side, you have the page for the month of February, so of course it's an appropriate winter scene. Look at the amount of detail and attention given to the peasant scene. You see, the one on your left, the May page, is aristocratic, and so it's full of brilliant and lavish costumes. But the February page on the right is documenting a peasant scene. Check out the next detail. These are the peasants. And this documents what the peasants did ordinarily during the month of February. They were cold and they went to warm themselves by the fire, as you can see there on the left. This is a scene from everyday life. And any scene that documents an ordinary event, a run-of-the-mill moment, ordinary life kind of stuff, is called a genre scene. Genre. G-E-N-R-E. G-E-N-R-E. It's on your word list. A genre scene is just a scene from everyday life. And apparently, peasants, in order to warm themselves by the fire, lift up their skirts all the way so that you can tell that they are male. Keep looking. You'll see exactly what I mean. Talk about fascination with realism and details, huh? This brings that to a whole new level. Meanwhile, we have crows picking the ground beneath the snow for what grain they can find. Everything is noted with care and with skill, and there's such a powerful sense of observation, to say the least. Now we're looking at what is particularly called Flemish painting. Flemish painting. It was in 1415 when the 100 Years' War between France and England came to an end. England ends up winning. Well, when England wins, this ends French patronage of the arts for a while. In 1416, the Duke of Berry died. And in 1420, the capital of Burgundy moved to a different city called Bruges. You don't need to know that. Just thought I'd fill your mind with more useless information. But in 1420, the capital of Burgundy moved to a region called Flanders. Now, you don't call the art from Flanders Flanderish art, because that would be too easy. It's known as Flemish art. And this Flemish art, this region of Flanders, is what you know of today as northeastern France, Belgium, some of the Netherlands. Well, our first example of Flemish, not Flanderish, of Flemish art is given to us by this guy, the master of Flamel, as he was known for years until they finally figured out what his real name was, which wasn't all that exciting. It was Robert Campin. Master of Flamel sounds far more intriguing than Robert Campin. But they're one and the same. And this is his famous altarpiece called the Marode altarpiece. It is a triptych. It has 3 parts, 3 panels. And when it's opened up, as you can see here, you get a view of the Virgin Mary's house. Look in the large center panel. It's the Annunciation, and it's a tremendous step towards realism and factual detail. Look at how the pages of the book curl. Look at the cross shape that those lilies in that vase make. Look at that candle on the table with the smoke rising from it. It's just been put out by the breeze that the angel Gabriel brings into the room with him. He comes in so quickly that the candle goes out and the pages of the book turn. There's an incredible sense of observation here. Check out the perspective. Look at that bench that enormous Virgin Mary is leaning against. Look at how that bench zooms back into space, and at how the side walls converge a little too rapidly. But that's okay. You come to understand what the space is like, what the interior of the house is like. This is the run-of-the-mill interior of a Flemish household. Now, when you look at the drapery of the Virgin and the angel, you'll see that that drapery is much heavier, much blockier, far more angular than anything we ever saw in Italy. This really heavy, blocky, angular drapery makes the figures look really sculptural, doesn't it? On the far left panel, you have the 2 people who paid for the altarpiece. The donors. They donated the altarpiece, so they're included in the painting. They're peering through the open door at the Annunciation scene taking place inside. Whereas on the far right panel, you have Joseph at work in his carpenter's shop. The tools on his table are the actual tools that were in use during this time. There's this great focus on family life. There's this great focus on a typical middle-class household. Look at these wonderful details of that central panel. You can see what I mean about that heavy, blocky, angular drapery on these figures that makes them so huge and so sculptural. And check out the detail on the right. The pages turn, the candle is snuffed out, the flowers are in this beautiful cross shape. This altarpiece is just a fascinating mixture, a fascinating combination of sacred and secular. It's sacred because, well, good grief, we have the Annunciation taking place here. That's pretty sacred. But it's secular, it's non-religious in all of the factual detail.